Hello, how are you? Glad you're with us. Thanks as always for tuning into Floor 9. I'm your host, Ryan Miller, and today we're talking tech conferences, Google I.O., and Microsoft Build specifically. Joining me for today's episode are Chelsea Freitas and Thomas Trudeau. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for having us. What a crazy couple weeks it's been.
It really has been a crazy couple of weeks and definitely a bunch of exciting announcements to fuel to that AI lunacy that's been dominating the talk track and the ecosystem of the tech landscape. So let's dive into some of those. And I want to start first with Microsoft. As you can imagine, both Google and Microsoft dove very deep into how AI is transforming their businesses at their respective events over the course of the last 2 weeks. But I want to start on the surface. You guys see what I did there? Microsoft took the wraps off a handful of their 2024 refreshes at its hardware event that preceded Build. Consumer-centric versions of the newest Surface laptop and the Surface Pro were unveiled. Both start at $999.99 and launch on June 18th. Microsoft calls the Copilot PCs the most powerful Windows PCs ever built. Now, from those hardware announcements, I want to know, Chelsea and Tom, is there anything that excited you from those?
It's good to see big tech pursuing innovation again. I think it's been a while since the PC experience changed materially, so I just like the competition. And then more importantly, maybe we can finally get some reverse Mac versus PC ads where the PC is the cool young guy and the Mac is the old lame guy.
Yeah. Except I think Justin Long is probably an old lame guy now, so he could probably reprise his role on the other side of the equation.
We're definitely seeing thematics like that, like the arms race playing out in advertising too. I think we'll get into that a little bit later. Yeah, I think it's exciting to see some competition and upping the stakes. With Microsoft making these key developments, we're also seeing things like Adobe pledge more support. With Microsoft leveling the playing field, we're seeing more adaptability and more flexibility.
And now one of the features that was called out as like a fundamental game changer for these new AI powered machines are NPUs, which are neural processing chips. Tom, do you think that this is going to be table stakes for hardware in this era of AI?
There's so much hype around AI and FOMO. I fully expect the industry to react as though it is now table stakes, other than maybe at the low end of the market for cheaper models that are necessarily designed to do fewer things. This isn't a technical group, but any AI tasks like machine learning, natural language processing, you're going to need a lot of compute power for that, and NPUs are designed specifically for those types of workloads.
And then beyond just like the NPUs of it all, Chelsea, do you think it's becoming table stakes to have AI incorporated into any product that you ship today, even agnostic of this specific subset of computers that we're talking about?
I think for this very specific moment of time, yes. We talk about the hype cycle a lot, and we will eventually get to a place where deployment is more regular, AI is productized and just naturally baked in from a hardware and software perspective. But in this moment of time, I feel like from a marketing feature and lens, yes, we need AI baked in to compete.
I definitely agree. And I know it definitely helps drive sales when you have AI on that board in the store to help convince consumers to stop by and demo some of those sexy new features that Google and Microsoft have been talking about. But what I'm really excited about with the Surface Pro laptops and the Surface Pro themselves is they're slimming down the form factor of some of these high-powered processing devices. And what I think it's most akin to is what we're seeing on the Apple side of things from the iPad and the Air. Now, Tom, do you think that this is a legitimate competitor to those two products from Apple? Do you think that was Microsoft's intention in kind of slimming down the form factor and baking in some of these new features?
Sure, I think that was definitely their intention. And by all early accounts, the design and power of these Ps are top notch. But I'm also skeptical that Apple users especially are going to feel the need to go out and buy a Qualcomm or really any Windows powered PC. If you're a Mac user, your computer lives are fully Appleized with seamless integration across devices. And if it turns out that people really do want AI in their personal computers, we'll talk about the recall in a moment. My expectation is that's going to be commoditized, and Apple will, whether it's a third-party partnership or through their own proprietary tech, they're going to go ahead and replicate that. So I love the competition, but I don't necessarily see it as differentiating them in a way that people are going to want to go out and buy it.
That's a totally fair assessment, and I think we'll learn more upon WWDC later in the summer. But to your point, it's really an ecosystem play at this stage in time where people who are, Microsoft users are probably going to load up on their Surfaces to go with their PCs, to go with their Xboxes. Whereas if you've been an iPhone stan for 10 years, you're probably just sticking to your Air and iPad specifically. But Tom, you had mentioned recall, and I do want to dive into that because Microsoft is launching that very exciting feature for Copilot Plus PCs. It's a new Windows 11 tool that is going to keep track of everything you see and do on your computer, and in return, give you the ability to search and retrieve anything that you've done on that device. Recall won't work on every Windows 11 computer, though. You'll have to buy one of the several new Copilot Plus PCs that are powered by Qualcomm's new Snapdragon X Elite chips, which have those neural processing units that we were talking about. One last part of technical information that I feel it would behoove us to include here is that there are minimum tech requirements that you need to run Recall on your computer. Minimum hard drive space is 256 gigabytes, with 50 gigabytes of space needs to be available at any time in order to do so. Chelsea, I know that was a lot in terms of an overview, but I just want to know, what are your general thoughts on the recall feature? Is this helpful? Is it safe? Is it just weird and creepy?
We're still in the era of weird, okay? I mean, this isn't brand new news. We obviously have the rewind feature for Mac. So we've been exposed to this. I think Microsoft is playing catch up here, and I think the AI integration is what's turning up everybody's ears and really making people pay attention to this. On the surface, this could be great, deriving those local insights, being able to call back, but it's all in the fine print. I think this exposes users to like so many potential safety issues. So a quick scroll through Twitter, scroll of the comment section, people are pretty up in arms about this. But that said, there's already so much going on behind the scenes. Now we're really just amplifying it with AI capabilities. It's kind of a wait and see. Are those insights going to come from analyzing the screenshots? Like, how is this actually going to work, and what information ultimately will be shared back to Microsoft? I think there's just a lot of questions about how it's going to work on the back end before we can make some of these calls.
I think the one thing that Microsoft is really evangelizing to help assuage some of those concerns from consumers is that they're promising that the recall index will remain local and private on device as opposed to being stored in the cloud, meaning you can pause, stop, delete captured content, or choose to exclude specific apps or website. So when you pop open that private browser, I don't think that it'll necessarily be included in your recall window.
Yeah, I did read about that. And look, the idea of a personal historian, I'm so here for that. So I do think there's exciting promises about this feature, but we are in that wait and see to really understand how people are going to utilize it and if the use cases outweigh the potential fears that we're seeing right now.
And real quick before I pivot over to Tom and his thoughts on the matter, you mentioned Mac's rewind feature. Is that something that you had used before, or have you kind of just seen in the greater media landscape people talking about it?
Really just seeing people in the media landscape talk about it. I believe it's what, like $20 a month, or it was at launch. So that was one that I sat out, especially given that from a work perspective, my work is done on the Mac hardware. So that is another barrier that we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode, I think. But a lot of our computing is done in a work capacity, and these are commercial devices. So I think it's different when we're operating from a personal mindset versus using that technology from a work perspective. So that one I didn't use. Tom, do you use Mac Rewind?
No, I've never used it, and I don't know anybody who has used it.
Other than Ben Thompson. Shout out.
But Tom, if you're not a rewind user, if you have any PC products in your house, do you think you would be a recall user once this ships? I know that you are kind of at the forefront of testing AI products from a lab perspective.
So I'm relatively bearish on this feature at the moment. There is the creepy trust factor that we alluded to. I don't have any reason to doubt Microsoft. I believe them that it would be safe and secure. But I also just watched the Ashley Madison documentary about the data breach. And when you talk about really sensitive personal information, are enough people going to feel comfortable exposing their entire digital lives to total recall? Even beyond that, I'm having a hard time imagining what is the paradigm shift, what's the killer app use case that instantly helps us all do something better or faster. However, I don't want to over-index on the moment, and I do think this is sort of phase one, building towards really unimaginable use cases, and I'm excited to see what those are.
I don't know if that total recall was a meaningful allusion to the Schwarzenegger 90s hit, but if it was, bravo. But to keep pushing on beyond recall and into some of the other announcements from Microsoft, Satya Nadella opened 2024's Build event discussing two dreams that Microsoft has had for decades. Number one, Can computers understand us instead of us having to understand computers? And two, in a world where we have ever increasing information, can computers help us reason, plan, and act more effectively on all of that information? So I think the new hardware we just touched on is helping Microsoft and its users recognize those dreams, but the suite of software unveiled at Build might be even more influential. Tom, starting with you, is there anything that stood out from that large set of announcements as particularly interesting? I know there was a lot of them.
I love Satya Nadella's ambition, and we'll talk a little bit about agents in a little bit. But I think I'm most interested, my bias is towards what are the products and services that can get into the hands of the most people right away. So I am excited to see if GPT 4.0, with its free offering, it's much faster. Latency is a really big deal with consumer-facing products. I'm curious to see if that unlocks, I wouldn't necessarily call it a paradigm shift, but will people start to use that day to day? I was especially interested in its potential as sort of like an AI tutor that would help billions of students right away. And so what are those use cases that people can actually get into their hands right away? That's why GPT 4.0 interested me.
Yeah, GPT 4.0 is definitely one of the exciting announcements and how it's being integrated into all of Microsoft's products. Sam Altman was also on stage during the Build conference to tease out GPT-5. So I think that we're going to start seeing a lot more collaboration between Microsoft and obviously OpenAI. But Chelsea, that's just one of the many announcements that was made during Build. Do you have a pick for your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good time to shout out the custom copilots. I feel like that could be a great consumer facing resource, whether using it personally or using it to harness larger services. I read a couple examples about HR utilizing it to create more chat functions. And I think there's, again, to Tom's point on scalability, I think this could make things easy and simple for consumers right away. I think it'll be exciting to see what people begin developing and how those come to life.
Yeah, I really like some of the custom Copilot examples that they demoed on stage. They kind of had a three-pronged approach from the less tech focused consumers all the way up to developers and how you can implement some of these co-pilots into your day-to-day activities. So from the most basic level, people can go into SharePoint, click on a couple of documents and create a co-pilot that can be trained on a proprietary set of data in your organization. Basically just a couple of clicks in a menu, and then you have this new tool to aid you in your day-to-day work. And then all the way on the developer side of things, they have something called Copilot Studio, which will allow you to test some of these new tools inside of a coding environment and be able to see how they are processed on the back end in real time. Definitely a lot to look forward to from a Copilot development perspective and allowing consumers to really have a more active role in teasing out some of these new processes and features that are going to be a result of this. One thing that I want to touch on before we move away from some of these consumer-facing features is the Copilot for Xbox. That was something that really piqued my interest as, resident nerd in chief here at the lab. They had mentioned that they're going to look to integrate this into first-party titles initially, things like Minecraft, because Microsoft owns Mojang. So imagine you're playing on your Xbox, pick up your controller, and you're looking around asking, how do I actually make a sword? Now you can have the AI provide you step-by-step instructions on screen while you're actually playing a game. So you don't have to pull up your mobile device or go to your second screen in order to find out more information.
Okay, I'm going to pose a question back to you, Ryan. So obviously we talk so much about gaming communities and gamers being some of the hardest communities to penetrate, like knowing these are people who have their rituals, their behaviors, their groups. Do you think this will be successful among hardcore gamers, or do you think it's going to help people onboard into different gaming spaces? Says the aspiring gamer girl over here.
I think definitely the latter. I don't know if hardcore gamers will flock to this as much as someone who's a novice in this space. I think hardcore gamers will refer to the old adage of get good in terms of helping people level up. But I think that making it more approachable for everyone trying to enter a new gaming ecosystem is definitely the way forward. Xbox had actually experimented with a different kind of Copilot previously, which allowed two people to play the same game at once using two separate controllers. So imagine a father and son sitting there trying to play a game for the first time. You could see how having dad help out with the analog sticks and having Copilot in the background providing instructions can really level up that gameplay experience for dad, for son, for daughter, whoever it might be who's getting their hands on the controller. That's what I think is really interesting about the AI integration into Xbox.
Definitely the era of democratized gaming. Exciting to see that as well.
Speaking of democratized gaming, Microsoft demoed a volumetric app inside of a Meta Quest 3 device that showcased the 3D rendering of an Xbox controller. So what do we think that signals? Is that an intent to rival Apple in spatial computing? What are the other implications?
I think that this definitely signals their intent to rival Apple on the spatial computing front, though I don't know if they'll use that same verbiage, given that Apple pretty much owns it. They'll probably be pushing that mixed reality jargon. But I'm interested to see if MetaQuest 3 is the limit of the partnerships that they strike in this spatial computing mixed reality space. I think there's opportunities with Steam and their HTC Valve device, as well as these other ancillary AR and VR devices. So I think that this is their first step in taking some of those products and services that exist in 2D format and bringing them to 3D worlds. I think that we've been talking or hovering around this paradigm shift in computing throughout this conversation. This move into more virtual environments, I think, is something that is futuristic and Microsoft has big bets on, as well as Apple.
So obviously there's so many features to talk about and still some to come given the other conferences that are ahead of us. Do you think that people are going to realize they're using AI, or is this just another use case of something becoming productized or a feature once this actually ships?
At the lab, we often talk about how history says whenever new AI capabilities, eventually they just become known as a feature or technology generically. So I'm not sure that we should have a prediction here, but I do expect there's going to be a new set of nomenclature to emerge, especially around things like AI agents and companions that are going to help us with nearly every single task. So who knows exactly how we will refer to it, but I do think that that's sort of the next frontier in terms of how we talk about technology and features.
I agree with that, Tom. And I think that I would go one step further in saying that there might be a division in the demographic of people who realize they're using AI and other people who are just using another feature on the tool set that they're already accustomed to. I think similar to today, how developers on the back end understand coding, there's only a small segment of the population who speak that language. And I think that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they'll probably be brought up on this AI training and probably be the developers of the future, whatever that looks like in the next paradigm shift of computing. But I think that 90% of the population will probably just be like, this is another feature in the tool that I use every single day.
Why don't we talk about some advertising implications?
Yeah, I definitely want to close the conversation on Microsoft by talking about those implications you just alluded to. As of the end of April, all advertisers have access to Copilot on the Microsoft advertising platform, allowing users to utilize the AI assistant to have natural language conversational chats, to synthesize info, make recommendations for ad creative assets, use AI generated images for those ad assets. Now, beyond the optimizing of the efficiency and effectiveness of campaigns on the back end, we're also seeing ads appear as sources for Copilot's outputs. It seems brands now have the ability to promote their answers or results in Copilot queries in addition to traditional search. I want to know, how does this make you feel, Tom? Is this icky or is this par for the marketing course?
We've already seen pushback online, but by now, surely people have to understand the trade-offs that exist. You either pay a premium or else we see ads for a cheap or free product. That's kind of the deal of the internet era. I think what is potentially uniquely icky is if we're used to receiving one answer from our AI-powered products and services, does that degrade trust if that one answer goes to the highest bidder? Because that would undermine confidence in certain products for sure.
Chelsea, what about you? Do you think that more brand advertisers are going to be flocking to inserting their products at the top of these AI queries?
I'm curious to see in what categories this is going to prove success. I think we'll see a handful of brands test it, or I'd like to see brands test it. And from a consumer perspective, this really is just a lot of change happening all at once. We've become accustomed to paid searches. We know how to translate what Google is offering us and comb through those search results from that perspective. This is a new interface. And not only is it a new interface, it's change happening very quickly for the everyday consumer. So for the average consumer, there's really a new learning manual to decipher what is true and what is a paid sponsorship. Back to my key point of we'll see it used differently in different product categories and different content categories. So it's a little too soon to say how successful this will be, but ultimately it's a lot of change happening very quickly, and that's driving a lot of the backlash.
If you had to put your finger in the air and guess what categories, you think in CPG retail?
Probably. I mean, I think AI has major implications from a retail perspective beyond just search results or AI-powered results. But I do think the nuance of product will definitely be something that AI can help explain and personalize.
Especially as personalization comes to the forefront with Copilot and it starts to learn more of your behaviors over time. And, Recall is going to know every single skirt, dress, pair of jeans you've looked at on the internet. So you can imagine you will have hyper-tailored recommendations in those AI query responses. Before we close this out, I do want to say media planners everywhere can definitely rejoice with having it on the Microsoft advertising platform. I think internally we've seen tools developed at the agency level in order to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of your campaigns, but being able to just click a button on the back end and just have the AI optimize the performance of your campaign will save you lots of legwork in terms of planning out those next brand dollars.
All right, everybody, switching gears into Google. We have so much to talk about. I/O, like Build, had a multitude of AI announcements, but we want to start on updates to Google's search product, something we're all familiar with. AI Overview was announced as an evolution of SGE, Search Generative Experience, which was rolled out last year. An AI Overview powered by Gemini brings multi-step reasoning to Google Search. The tool summarizes content from search at the top of the page, and it can use data from Google's other services like Maps, for example, to answer users' typed questions as well as respond to those video inputs. So, Tom, do you think this is a better way to search?
I love Google's SGE. I've been using it for about 6 months now in beta. And also the early research is that Gen Z really likes generative search. They enjoyed the SGE beta more than any other cohort. I think it's just the logical conclusion of where Google has been going for years. They've been slowly pushing out publisher links in favor of just delivering answers. I'm interested to see what do they do with the more thorny searches that people tend to make around that maybe more controversial topics. It used to be you would get 10 blue links, and so who cares if some of them weren't to your liking? But now, if you get one answer, what happens if you ask a question about like an election and the answer isn't one you agree with? And what happens if you're a brand and you have a sponsored post next to that answer?
I'm curious, Tom, you talk about this era of 10 blue links, and in an offline conversation we were having earlier in the week, we were talking about the end of like surfing the web, because now you're getting the answer right at the top of the search results. Do you think there are still people who crave that blue linkness?
I don't think people want to spend time searching for information if they don't have to. They want good answers quickly. So I think in that regard, this is just a better search product. Now, that doesn't mean it's all sunshine and rainbows. The early estimates is that organic search traffic for publishers could decline by double-digit percentages. I've seen as high as 60%. So I do think that this is going to kill a lot of online publishers, and probably in its place will be replaced by 10x or 100x or 1000x more AI-generated content.
1000x? Wow.
I thought era of blue linkness is quite funny as we talk about people adapting what they expect to see from that typical search behavior. But I also agree with you, and a lot of the examples we're seeing right now are more lighthearted. So thank you for integrating some more other use cases, Tom. Those are smart things to consider and think about.
And now Tom mentioned brand showing up next to that answer. And like Copilot, Google is allowing brands to insert their messaging and products along with these AI overviews. Do you think, Chelsea, a lot of brands are going to be flocking to take advantage of this, much as like we're seeing with Microsoft?
Definitely, because it's already where the bulk of people are going to search. So I think brands will probably test here first.
Tom, what about you? Should brand advertisers be prioritizing placements in AI overview?
I think the reality is there's a lot of unknowns in terms of brand safety. If I were an emerging D2C product, I would be really excited to experiment. I heard a point of view yesterday. Google probably already knows from testing if AI overviews ads perform better, worse, or the same. So this is possible. It will be absolutely great for brands. But if I were a legacy brand with a lot to lose, I'd probably want to wait and see.
Yeah, and if you're a legacy brand, is your audience there yet? You know, you have to think about your audience in these capacities and in these environments. Who's searching there? Who's the early adopters? And does it fit with your brand? There's a lot of things to consider here.
Do you think there's any trickle-down credit for the brands who decide to be first movers in advertising and AI overview? Do you think they'll get plaudits from the media and consumers alike for being on the cutting edge of AI, if you will?
Wait a second, I'm having deja vu from metaverse headlines. As tech enthusiasts and strategists here, we can remember a lot of eras where brands rushed and were first. Sometimes there are absolutely benefits, but there are so many different watchouts to consider. I'm curious, Tom, what do you think?
It depends if you think there's no such thing as bad press, because you could definitely imagine a scenario where I search favorite vacations and a cruise company shows up #1 result and it says sponsored, there's going to be people who post that and say like, look how shady this is. I just wanted some recommendations and instead it went to the highest bidder. So in that scenario, do you want your brand to show up in that screenshot, or are you maybe worried about what that backlash looks like?
So search is definitely not the only Google product getting a dramatic AI overhaul. Gemini is becoming more prominent across G Suite, like Copilot has across Microsoft Work products. Tom, know that you've had some hands-on experience with this. Has it improved the user experience for you? Are the tools intuitive? And do you think users will adopt this?
I think if your life is Googleized, then Gemini could eventually really change your life and make it a lot easier.
Applified and Googleized. I love these new terms you're coming up with.
Yeah, what I mean by that is if you're someone you use Drive to create Google Docs, build spreadsheets, you have Gmail and you send emails, maybe you watch YouTube, maybe you even listen to YouTube Music because it's thrown into YouTube Premium for free. All of these tools are going to be integrated into Gemini, and most of them are searchable in Gemini today. So I can actually ask Gemini to go through my emails and summarize a particular newsletter, for example, from the past few days or past weeks. And that's nothing to say of some of the creator-led products like music and video creation. So long term, the ability for Google to deliver personalized experience for us day to day is very exciting. The question is, how quickly can they catch up? Because many people think they're behind in terms of the horsepower of their models. How quickly can they catch up to capitalize on their massive user base? A lot of what they teased at I/O is theoretical.
And when you say behind, do you mean behind Microsoft, behind OpenAI, or lagging behind all?
Behind OpenAI, yeah. Ultimately, their goal is to make AI useful to everyone. And so the reason I'm excited about Gemini is because Google has such massive scale that you could imagine all of us having these readily available touch points with our data that we already use.
Yeah, and obviously I can see how from a professional perspective, this can really upgrade the performance of teams and individuals in the G Suite portfolio. But what I'm also interested in is how Gemini is being used to create something that Google is calling gems, which is allowing you to customize its AI chatbot to create personal experts. Think, for example, a positive, upbeat, and motivating running coach that gives a running plan for each day. Chelsea, do you think that this kind of use case is going to accelerate adoption and utilization of AI?
Definitely. And I think, we already use, I'm saying we, obviously quite broadly, but Google is one of the first more advanced situations or platforms for the everyday user. I'm thinking like a .edu email address likely. So as we think about people aging into different ecosystems, I think there's a lot of personalization that we expect from Google. And I think people will be more hungry and readily willing, let's say, forgiving and willing to test out these different personalized gems. And I think we'll see a lot of creativity in this space as people get their hands on it.
Tom, have you created a gem yourself, or have you theorized an idea of a gem you'd like to create?
I haven't created a gem yet, but whether it's gems or another AI agent, I really think this is what could transform productivity by the end of the decade. I do wonder, access to the right data could be a barrier here. If an agent is going to give us at the lab, for example, high quality first drafts of our work, it needs access to documents and spreadsheets and presentations. So right now, I think it's a lot to ask for most people to sort of gather these documents and pieces of information that are going to make the AI agents work for them. But I do think by the end of the decade, this is what's going to accelerate productivity across industries.
I wonder what kind of API integrations they'll open up to allow you to tap into different data points across your computing ecosystem or even in your smart home. The one gem that came to mind for me that I'd be dying to test out is syncing it to the camera inside my refrigerator to determine what's for dinner, and then provide me step-by-step instructions on my Google Home device that is conveniently located on my kitchen counter to step-by-step instruct me on how to create a fanciful feast for me and my wife at supper time. So that's just one idea that I had that would be really ending one of the most what's for dinner is one of the hardest questions to answer every single day.
It's daunting.
Yes, thank
and
you.
Repetitive.
Exactly. Daunting and repetitive, the what's for dinner question. So I'm definitely sinking my teeth into that gem once that functionality becomes available. But speaking of consumer-facing AI, what about the new creative tools that Google rolled out during I/O 24? I think we touched very briefly on multimodal when we were talking about GPT-4o and plans for GPT-5 in the Microsoft section, but Google unveiled AI-powered generation tools for images, videos, and music called Imagine 3, Veo, and Music AI Sandbox, respectively. Tom, do you think that this solidifies, consolidates their position as a leader in multimodal AI?
So a year ago at I/O, the number of times that Sundar Pichai and co said the words AI was astronomical. This year, the buzzword du jour was indeed multimodal, I believe in response to what they had just seen from OpenAI only a week prior when they announced ChatGPT 4.0 and other products. I don't know that they're the leader in multimodal. I still think that's OpenAI, but the big wild card for Google is YouTube and YouTube Music. If you are a creator and YouTube has these seamless video creation tools that let you leverage text to video, or if you're able to remix songs, which is a very popular way to engage with music on platforms like TikTok and Spotify, I think that gives them a material edge, just integrating those products and services into YouTube and YouTube Music directly.
Chelsea, personally, are you ready for AI generated video? Is that something that you're seeking out on the internet to consume today? Do you think that other consumers have an appetite for this kind of content?
I mean, no shame. I feel like everyone, okay, this is something that we have to like take with a grain of salt, but everyone will be consuming AI generated content. And I think thinking about it from those buckets of content is really important, right? We're going to have some type of things we consume that's Oscar worthy, Emmy worthy, Grammy worthy, but the bulk majority of what people consume now are not on that level of production, right? We all watch our reality TV show. We all seek out filler content, lo-fi beats, things like that. So I do think AI will fill a certain bucket of content for every consumer. We're all going to have something we really like in the near future, and that's okay. But not everything is going to be that super high quality. That'll be filled by other outlets.
Yeah, and as a huge Bravo head here, I can definitely see AI making a season of VPR or Below Deck or something like that. I definitely wouldn't call that highbrow content of any sort. Definitely not winning any Emmys, Academy Awards, things like that. Tom, I do want to bring the conversation back to YouTube, though, since you did mention YouTube Music. I know the AI sandbox is going to open up new remixing opportunities and net new generation of audio content. But one of the other features that I thought was super interesting was the ability to translate and transcribe videos in real time using artificial intelligence. Do you think that this is going to really open up new kinds of content to users at a global level?
You can see across a creator economy, whether it's Google or any other platform, that the dream is sort of create content one time and then repackage it using AI in every format and every language. So whether it's a podcast that's filmed that ultimately becomes a YouTube short and a TikTok short, and then you also create that same piece of content in every language, it's all about maximizing distribution and reach with the least amount of effort and time.
I think I'm going to give you a homework assignment off of the back of this episode. I know that you've experimented with music generation AI tools in the past to create catchy jingles or theme songs for Floor 9, but I'm going to issue a challenge for you to create another one using the new music AI sandbox tool from Google, given that you're pretty bullish on this.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because I think what a lot of the startups are focused on is creating music from scratch. I think the use case that's going to take off is the ability to seamlessly remix songs. It's sort of a known use case on these ultra popular platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
We talked pretty extensively about Microsoft Build and Google's I/O, but before we wrap, I do want to do a couple of quick ones. What about the OpenAI of it all? Anything we should be thinking about beyond GPT 4.0? Is anyone else worried about OpenAI pulling an Ursula and stealing their voice?
I think it's very clear that they're absolutely ruthless in pursuit of winning at all costs. I think it's very telling that Microsoft doesn't fully trust them. So if you're Apple or a developer or a user, should we? They have the lead right now in terms of horsepower, but it'll be interesting to see if that's enough for them to win the AI wars. Time will tell.
I think the one thing that's worth calling out here is we don't totally know what's going to come out of WWDC from Apple in the coming weeks. There are a lot of rumors that Apple and OpenAI have potentially struck up a deal. So that would create the ultimate playground for OpenAI and a lot of other new possibilities.
It's a really high stakes moment for Apple. If you partner with OpenAI and they power Siri, for example, are you king-making them now, just as Microsoft is becoming a rival in the PC space? If Apple partners with Google, is there antitrust scrutiny? And if you don't, are you risking creating a monster because Google Pixel and Android phones have a differentiated voice assistant using Gemini long-term? So what are the other unintended consequences? And what about their in-house AI capabilities? So we're going to learn a lot over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I think that later in June, Apple will have lots to say regarding artificial intelligence and their plans for OpenAI integration. Whether they're true or not, we'll see that come to the fore later in June. So I think after Microsoft's build, they have really positioned themselves quite strongly on the laptop front, but the mobile side is really far from settled. We know that PC is tied to businesses, professionalism, enterprise service apps, but those consumer-facing apps being integrated into mobile operating systems and what OpenAI is going to be doing with Apple is going to be very important for brands to keep their eye on. I think this Apple announcement is going to be crucial in deciding who emerges in the ascendancy from an artificial intelligence perspective. As ever, thank you, Chelsea and Tom, for being here today, and thank you for listening to Floor 9. If you're looking for 100% human-generated insights in this increasingly AI-dominated world, you can find them on our Twitter at IPG Lab and on Medium at IPG Media Lab. Until next time, bye-bye.